So we can take some notes on this. I think it's kind of important. What I do is similar to Giselle and Haley. Like I'll try to read the passage first. And the reason is because the questions sometimes are kind of similar in some way. Like you'll always know you get like a main idea question, right? And so it's gonna be rare, Miles, I think, for like you're not needing to read a large chunk of the passage. So there will always be like, I think one or two questions that's like, what's the main idea or what's the purpose, like, or what's the general theme of the passage? So it's important, I think, to understand like generally what the whole passage is about. And then there are some other questions that will just like refer to specific lines, and so I think generally the kinds of questions are going to be pretty similar between passage, like in terms of structure and the format and things like that. So, but if it helps you, you can, of course, read the questions beforehand. I just find if you're pressed for time, maybe like you can cut that part out and maybe you can still answer the questions very well if you just read the passage first. But the way I read the passage actually is not, I don't read it like that carefully because, well, one, I'm a very slow reader. I don't know about you guys. So if I wanted to like actually read it, then it would take me a very long time. It would probably take me, remember, you only have about 3 minutes to read the passage. So I will do something more like skimming it. But first, the first thing actually I do is read the blurb. And I read the blurb very carefully. So you had to like put steps. So we're trying to take notes here. Like number one would be read the blurb. And the blurb I read very carefully because it's only like usually 2 or 3 sentences. I think it'd be helpful of the reading test and just show people like what I mean by the blurb. But I think everyone knows, right? It's like the little section, yeah, at before the passage. So in this case, it says, this passage is from Lydia Minatoya, The Strangeness of Beauty, 1999, by Lydia Minatoya. The setting is Japan in 1920. Chie and her daughter Naomi are members of the House of Fuji, a noble family. So actually I can learn a lot just from reading the blurb. Like I already kind of have an idea of what the story will be about. The things I think about in my head are like, what is the genre? So it's like fiction. I already know it's fiction. The main idea is like something around, I don't really know the main idea that much, but I already know two characters, Chie and Naomi. They're like mother and daughter, and they're part of a noble family. And I also know this is in Japan in 1920. So it gives me like a sense of where the passage might be going. So the blurb is something I read first. And then I will the the passage. And when I say skim, it's kind of like something you have to learn and practice on your own because sometimes people are not very good at skimming. I know because like you don't really understand things very well if you skim. So do what works for you. Like you can read everything, but you can read a bit more quickly. Like you don't have to read every single sentence so carefully. The sentences I would pay more attention to are usually like the first and last sentences of a paragraph because those are like transition sentences. Basically, you just want to get the main idea of the passage. So your end goal is so step two will be to skim the passage. And then step three will be to summarize the passage in your head in a few sentences, maybe 2 or 3 sentences maximum. So you want to skim it, but you want to understand it like at a level where you can basically summarize what's going on in the passage. So if you do those 3 things, so just 3 steps, read the blurb, skim, and then summarize it in your head before you go to questions. Just summarize it very quickly in your head. You don't even have to write it down. Just like in your head, think about like what's going on here. Then it makes answering the questions much easier because you already have a general main idea of the passage. So we read the blurb and then we skim. I want to practice